Hi there, it's Lindsay from EquiPilates and I'm bringing you the next top tips in our series of exercises out of the saddle to improve your performance in the saddle. Today's exercises are going to both be actually sitting down and they are to help you with your sitting trot. Now that doesn't just apply to you dressage divas, this is for anybody who needs to progress from trot to canter and back again. So anytime you've got to do a transition, it's really helpful if you can sit the trot in a comfortable, balanced and symmetrical way, able to absorb the horse's movement and be confident in those few or more steps of sitting trot. So our first one is going to be a little bit of a sort of calibration really for your hip area, and it's a release for the muscles in your hip that help to rotate your hip. One of those muscles is called the Piriformis. You might have heard of it before, and you'll see on the little graphic where it's located. It sort of attaches the bottom of your spine into the outside of your thigh bone. And it has all sorts of effects on your hip movement and also how well your pelvis can move in 3 dimensions in the saddle. So it's quite a key one to do. This is going to be our starting point and help us to sit more symmetrically and absorb the horse's movement through the sitting trot. So what we're going to do is cross one ankle over your knee. Now do make sure that you can actually sit comfortably in this position. If you're not comfortable getting into this position, then this is probably not the exercise for you. And if you'd like to, just drop me a private message and I can give you some pointers with a different way to do this. So it's important that your foot is softly on the outside of your thigh, so we've not got the kind of ankle in a weird and wonderful angle. So that is relaxed. We're going to pop our hands on top of your knee, and then what you're going to do is start to create a sense of movement of the leg doing this up into your hands, but you're not actually going to allow the movement to happen. So this is what's called an isometric contraction. So the muscle's kind of working, but no real movement is taking place. We're only going to do this movement or sense of movement for 20 seconds initially. And we're going to use a 20% effort level for this. So to find that, what you can do is you can do this, or the sense of this, against your hand as hard as you can really. That gives you your 100%. Now fairly immediately I want you to back that off by half, that'll give you your 50%, and then by about half again. I don't know if 20 isn't half of 50, but you know, you get the idea. So it's about a quarter of your, or just under a quarter of your maximum effort level. We hold this, as I said, for 20 seconds. So you do need to count this. It's quite important that you are fairly accurate with this. You can go 1 elephant, 2 elephant if you want, or time it on a stopwatch or your watch. And then we're going to uncross, just let it have a little wiggle. And then we're going to do the same again. So you can work out again with your 150 and then 20% effort level. And we hold this again for another 20 seconds. And we do this 4 times on the same leg with a brief rest for a little wiggle in the middle. And then we do the same on the other leg. So it's 4 lots of 20 seconds on one leg, and then 4 lots of 20 seconds on the other leg. So do make sure that you do both legs, okay? Now it's quite useful to do this just before you ride. So you could even do it on your mounting block if you want to. You can do it sitting on your settee, you can do it wherever you like. Ideally, if you find this helpful for you, you can feel a bit of a difference. Your horse might give you some feedback that they can feel a difference after you've done this. You might want to do this fairly frequently, and we often recommend 4 times a day actually for a few days, just to get some new patterns into the area that we're working on, and then you might want to just drop it down to just perhaps before you ride and after you ride as well if you would like. So here we are on the ball. It's quite important if you're using a Swiss ball for this exercise that you have the right size ball. So your ball wants to be big enough and pumped up to a degree that your hips are just slightly above your knees. So if your hips are sinking way down, lower than your knees, then the ball is probably a little bit small for you. We're going to have the feet and knees about the same width apart as your hip joint. So to find that, we can have the feet together, open the toes, and then open the heels. And this is going to be our grounding point. Little series of exercises to work through, just mobility series for your lower back. And then I'll show you a little technique, a little trick to help you really synchronize with the horse's movement in a useful way in the sitting trot. So to start with, just check in that you've got equal weight between your 2 feet. That's quite important. Imagine, you know, you're in your stirrups, you want very, very even sense of grounding through those 2 stirrups. So just keep an eye on that throughout all this exercise. Even weight through the seat bones when we're doing things symmetrically, even weight through the feet. So we're going to take the hands onto the hips. Just think about growing generally tall. Make sure you're breathing as well. And then we're going to rock the pelvis back and forth. And you're aiming to keep, as I mentioned, the weight as even through your feet as you can and as even through your seat bones as possible. So just moving the pelvis back and forth, making sure you're breathing, just to mobilise the lower back a little bit and the hips in this plane of motion. Then let's try going a little bit side to side. So we're actually going to use these waist muscles to almost pick up the bony shelf at the side of your hip, taking that one way and then the other. And I wonder if you can sense that your upper body and your shoulders can actually keep quite still as you do this, making sure you're breathing and making sure that your feet stay as evenly grounded as you can. And then just rest. So we've got forward and back, side to side. Then let's do a little bit of a rotation movement with the lower body. All these movements that I'm talking about combine into a 3D movement when you're actually in the sitting trot. So we're going to imagine that you have got in front of both of your knees a little invisible button, okay? And then what we're going to do is take one knee forward, the other one will travel back simultaneously, to press that invisible button. And then we do the same with the other leg. So we get this kind of travelling forward of your whole thigh, your knee, and that side of your pelvis simultaneously. So if I show you that from the side, that will look like this. Okay, so I call this push the button. So you get this kind of travelling forward of each half of your pelvis at once, or at a time, sorry. Okay, so back to the future, back to the front. Now let's combine them into something that's a little bit more like a sitting trot. So we're just going to start to bounce a bit. Just bounce on the ball in a kind of trot type speed. So we're just going up and down, keeping the weight as even as you can through your feet and as even as you can through your seat. So notice if you're kind of landing on one seat bone a bit more than the other, if you've got a bit of a wiggle going on. So we're just going to land as evenly as we can. But now comes the interesting bit. We are going to combine our little bounce with our push the button. So what we get is a little scoop, 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 scoop with each seat bone. As you're scooping, think about keeping your upper body fairly still. So this stays centred above the moving pelvis. Now you might notice within this scooping action that this actually is the same as the movement of your horse's back underneath you in that trot. We know that the horse's legs move in diagonal pairs in the trot, so that means that their rib cage actually has a slight dip and swing away as each hind leg steps through. So as you're noticing and synchronizing with that little unilateral motion in your pelvis, you can gain a lot more flow and adherence to the saddle in that motion. Now, another thing to bear in mind is also your breath flow. This is a really big key for sitting trot. And I get loads of riders coming to me saying, oh, I need to improve my core stability. My trainer says I need to improve my core stability, or so-and-so says I need to improve my core stability so I can sit the trot better. Well, do you know, oftentimes it's actually simply breathing and getting some more fluidity in their partnership. So what you can do is, as you're practicing this little motion, you're scooping, you're sitting trot, you can breathe in for as many of these little movements as feels comfortable for you, and then breathe out for the same number, and start to build up a little bit of a breath pattern that you can keep consistent. And then practice that on your horse as well. So just keeping a very consistent flow of breath, matching your breath with his or her steps. And you can even on the ball practice imagining holding your reins as well, so that you can see whether you're able to move your hips and your pelvis, but keep your upper body fairly steady. So have a go at that. Let me know how you go on. I always like to hear from you, and see you next time.